All right, Cole, thanks so much. And here with President of Baseball Operations, Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, General Manager. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you here. My first Cubs convention. This has been awesome so far. It's been a lot of fun. What number is this for you in terms of Cubs convention? Have you counted it? Go back to when?
This will be our 12th season here. So, but I think we missed two, right? So this is number 10.
How about it? All right. Very cool. Carter, what's this been like for you?
Yeah, obviously my first Cubs convention. It's been so fun just seeing the passion and just the spirit of these fans. Obviously, we see it 81 times at Wrigley a year, but to see it in January is pretty special.
Okay, I want to start with this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have your phone with you? All right, will you promise me and these good folks that if somebody important calls you during this, you'll take the call live?
Well, deal.
All right.
You know, it's funny you said that because I was on The Score yesterday, and I almost took a call to deal with, we're doing an arbitration deal yesterday, right. And I'm like, Carter, I'm on the air. So I couldn't.
He said, handle it. I said, I got it.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to take that call. Yeah. I mean, let's transition into what's left to do. We'll get to the moves you've made, but is there still room to spend on reliever or another hitter, or what are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a couple calls on the way down here this morning with some agents, and we have, we're working on some things. I think that you kind of mentioned it. I think we're looking to, improve the bullpen, looking to continue to improve the bench, looking at bats. So, I mean, I think that the heavy lifting, the largest things we've done this winter, but certainly we're not done yet. And, honestly, we probably won't be done until we get to spring training. That's the way this usually works. The rest of the offseason may be somewhat slow that way, but I expect us to be talking to agents about their players really up until spring training starts.
Carter, sort of nerdy question, but what was your expectation of the general market for free agency going in, and then how it turned out? How surprised you been?
Yeah, love nerdy questions. I think the expectation was that we really didn't have one, just because we didn't know how the market was going to react coming off of COVID, coming off of the lockout. There's just so much uncertainty over the last 2 years that it was hard to know what the new normal was going to be. I think it definitely moved really, really fast. I think that was surprising to us to some extent, just how fast it moved, and how some of the marquee players came off the board really quickly. So I think that was something that really stood out for us, and obviously some really large deals for the guys at the top of the market, and we were really excited that we were able to get Dansby.
All right, so speaking of Dansby, can you take us through how that went, specifically what happened in terms of the signing and when the final moments you thought you were getting close, and sort of your reaction and you guys talking about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, we had a really, really good recruiter in Carter. Carter grew up basically in the same neighborhood as him. He played played summer ball with his brother. They both went to Vanderbilt, so that was really helpful, just from a personal
both have great hair.
Yeah. He's got you beat a little.
Yeah. So no, we had a great meeting with him in Atlanta, and then we were talking to his agent throughout. It was always a very positive vibe, and it was also interesting that in the middle of all the madness of free agency, Dansby was getting married. So we had the winter meetings ended on Thursday, and then his rehearsal dinner was on Friday. The wedding was on Saturday, and so the agent sort of said, "Listen, like, he's not going to talk about baseball for like 3 or 4 days," which is understandable. And so that put like a pause in the middle of the negotiation.
That create anxiety?
Yeah, because I think that these guys are flying off the board, and meanwhile we knew we were heavily involved with Dansby, but you couldn't talk for 3 or 4 days. I ended up getting the deal done. It was funny. I was at Scott Harris's wedding in San Francisco, and his rehearsal dinner was actually it was at the ballpark. He's new with the Tigers now, but when he planned the wedding, he was still with the Giants, and so the rehearsal dinner was at the ballpark. And so I was putting the final touches on the deal with Dansby, and I was walking around the outfield of AT&T Park, which I thought was amazing. But yeah, I got it done that weekend, and we were really excited. But it was interesting. It was a little bit slower process than some of the other ones, and I think in part his wedding was part of that.
I think the funnier part of that too was Jed and I were basically like dissecting our weddings. We're like, okay, so on day 2 of the wedding, he's probably gonna have like a 3-hour block. Did you have that 3-hour block at your wedding? Like, I bet you he could actually look at the offer then and like, yeah, we had no clue,
Right.
but what else were we gonna talk about?
Yeah, that's how you analyze it. Carter, give me in the macro before you went at it. You wanted to try to do what in free agency to impact the 2023 team? I mean, defense is clearly one of the places you'd start, but if you could give me the soundbite version of what were you guys trying to do?
I mean, obviously the short answer is make the team better and make the team significantly better. The longer answer is you have to look at the breadth of the market. You have to look at what your different positions are. Basically, what is our level of talent across our diamond, and then what would different additions do to that talent level? So as we thought about potentially bringing a shortstop on, the idea of being able to have a Gold Glove caliber shortstop playing second base and an actual Gold Glove caliber shortstop playing shortstop was really, really attractive to us, undoubtedly. Put into that as well that the shift is banned this year and the defensive positioning is going to be significantly different. It made us think, hey, a way that we can really potentially find a competitive advantage on this market is just making our defense really, really good. Add that with a guy like Cody Bellinger up the middle in center field, Tucker Barnhart to complement Jan behind the plate, and really felt like we're building out a strong defensive team. We need to score some runs. We're going to figure out ways to score runs. We need to prevent runs just on the mound. But at the end of the day, we're looking at how do we beat the market in terms of the players that we bring in to make them better than even the dollars that we're spending.
What do you sell to Cody Bellinger? Because, look, he's won. He obviously wants to win, but he's also trying to get himself back on a certain path. So, I mean, to some extent, it should be a real compliment that a guy who is looking for a chance to start himself back in the right direction picked you guys.
So one of the parts of the job that I really do love is, I mean, first of all, it's easy to sell Wrigley, Chicago. That's really easy. But really trying to think about the player and what he wants and how to connect with that player as far as free agency. And so with Cody, it was really like, listen, you've won an MVP award, you've been a Rookie of the Year, you've been a star. You struggle a little bit in 20 and 21. You're looking for a one-year deal to get back on track. We're the perfect place for it. The ballpark fits you well. We can let you play in center field. We have an opening in center field. Both of our hitting coaches were with the Dodgers with you in the minor leagues, so you have comfort with those guys. So really it was about, I mean, it's easy to sell playing here, but it's also selling, like, why would he want to sign here? And then that makes a lot of sense. A ballpark that fits him and coaches that he knows that he's comfortable with. Because if you're going to go to a place and try to break out and have a great year, you're going to want to be comfortable. And that was one of the things we sold on him is you're going to be comfortable here. You know the coaches you'll be dealing with, and the rest of it is you guys, and it sells itself.
Very cool. What about Jameson Taillon? Because he alluded to the fact that, I mean, Wrigley, he's familiar, he was excited, but also that you presented him with some stuff that said, this is where we think we can help you get even better.
Yeah, so Craig Breslow's one of our assistant GMs, and had a 10-year major league career, Yale guy, extremely smart, definitely a rising star in this game, but has helped build out our pitching department in a really, really strong way and brought on some really smart people and experienced people as well, and meshed that together with some really great plans that have helped our guys get better throughout the minor leagues. For Jameson, and at the major league level as well. For Jameson, we looked at all of the information that we had on him and had some ideas on how we potentially could partner with him to maximize his major league potential. And Craig drove to New York and nerded out on pitching with Jameson for several hours, and I think followed up with text after text after that, and I think just created that relationship and that comfort that Jed was talking about, that, hey, this is a place that he can not only come, but really thrive and be a part of a great environment and win some baseball games. So that one was also both difficult negotiation and recruitment from a standpoint of we put a lot of effort into it, but easy from a standpoint of just how good that fit was for the Cubs and for Jameson.
Like, full disclosure, if you were to compare where you guys are with the pitching infrastructure now and where it was 5 years ago, what's improved? Where were you deficient?
I think it's improved in almost every area. We hired Craig Breslow to be the director of pitching, and to his credit, he's just done a brilliant job of building out the entire infrastructure, hiring incredible coordinators, hiring great coaches at every level. So I think that's a big part of it, making sure our technology is at the highest level. But I think mostly it's an individualized program that each guy is like, how do we get the most out of this guy, whether it's strength and conditioning, delivery changes, grip changes, pitch usage. I think Craig and his group has done an incredible job of really trying to maximize every advantage. And part of it is just realizing that the game has changed. I think that when we were building up last time, we focused so much on pitchability, so much on strike throwing, so much on game calling. The game has changed now, and you have to have great stuff. You have to strike guys out. Obviously, we don't have a super high strikeout staff in the big leagues right now, and we have great defense as a result. But I think when you look at the minor leagues and what's coming, they're pretty high strikeout rates. We have really good stuff in the minors, and that's what wins in today's game. And so some of it is changing our emphasis a little bit in acquiring players, but a lot of it is just really individualizing what we do on the pitching level of each player, trying to maximize and optimize every single player that we bring in. I think Craig and his group do a great job of that.
How do you look at minor league talent? Because you guys have improved the farm system in a major way. Do you contemplate, well, we just signed Dansby Swanson and now X player is blocked? Or is it one of those things that you just assemble as much talent as possible? There's sort of lottery tickets, and if we have that problem, we'll deal with it when we deal with it.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place to think about replacement level and things of that nature and the guys that are coming up. But, I wish we were smart enough to know exactly what the future looks like, but we're just not. All we can do is make really good decisions about who we acquire, make really good decisions about how we help develop those players, help those players make great decisions about their career, and then let things play out. I remember in Cleveland, Jose Ramirez, he came up as a left fielder, then he was a third baseman, then he was a second baseman, then he was a shortstop, and now he's a third baseman again. If we had said, hey, we're not going to sign this guy or bring up this guy or that guy because of Jose or not because of Jose, I don't know that he would have become the player that he did. So really, I think for us, in a case like this, it's, hey, let's just make sure we're making each one of our players as good as they possibly can be every single day and let the cards fall where they may.
Do you think in terms of a plan, when you sit at your desk, do you think about 2024, 2025, 2026, or are you just thinking about this year? Like, how frequently are you thinking about a long-run plan and the next time we'll win the World Series and stuff like that?
I think it's almost like two different movies playing in my head at the same time. And I think you always have to be thinking about, what does our bullpen look like right now? How does our bench fit together? How does the pieces fit together now? But you can never lose sight of what you're building long term. And I think you're always in that mindset. And I think even when you get to that place where you're a great team, you're competing for a World Series title every year, you still have to be thinking ahead. I think you should never get to that point where you're not thinking about what does this look like in 3 to 5 years, because ultimately that time is going to come, and you want to make sure that you're prepared for it. But yeah, so I think you're always thinking both ways. But obviously, listen, I think right now when you're in the middle of the off season, at the end of the off season especially, you're thinking about how do you put the kind of fine points on this year's team.
Yeah, the 2023 movie. Rules. Carter, do you have a thought on specifically how you believe the rules are going to impact play on the field? And can you give us a little glimpse behind the curtain in terms of, have you done any internal testing in terms of what you anticipate the impact will be, whether on your team or in the league?
So the nice part about what MLB's done with these rules is they've piloted them at the minor leagues. So the no shift, the limited ability to step off and pick off as a pitcher, the larger bases, those things have been played out at a really high level of baseball. And so we've seen some of the impact just from those test cases. There's been more stolen bases. There's been more balls in play. There's been more just success in those different types of areas. expectation is that we're going to see some of that play out. We're going to see a little bit more action. And hopefully we're well positioned as a team, just with the people that we brought on and the guys we already had, to be able to react to some of those changes. But our hope is a little bit more action. Baseball's great, and from a standpoint of it's fun to hang out for 3 hours, but we also want to see some action, and I think we're well set up for that.
You like them?
Right now, yeah, we'll see. I'll tell you a couple months into the season.
Reserve the right to change my mind.
But right now, yeah.
What about you? Do you like them?
I do. I think that the game is better when the ball is in play. The game is better when it's quick. We went to a lot of minor league games last year, and I got to tell you that the pace of play was awesome. You felt like the middle innings moved really quickly. You found yourself in the sixth inning, like, oh, whoa, we're in the sixth inning. If I was in a major league game right now, I'd be the bottom of the third. And that's a good feeling, and I think that people appreciate that. I think, everyone loves a slugfest, but even a slugfest doesn't have to be played over 4 hours. And I think that we need to adjust how we do things, and I think aiming for something in the 2.5, 3 hour range, I think is great. I think you get to 3.5 and 4 hours, and I think people's attention starts to wane.
Was the pizza box bases, was that a Theo Epstein original?
So,
because I think he told me about it, I want to say like 7 years ago.
Yeah, so, sometimes a stolen idea is as good as your own idea,
He stole it.
I believe that Jeff Greenberg is actually the person that threw that out for the first time. I think we did a survey, and one of the questions was like, what creative thing could we do to kind of improve, run scoring. And I believe that Jeff Greenberg was the person that threw it out there first, but Theo did champion it at every level, and he's been the person that's really been pushing that. And it's a good idea. It's a really easy way to, maybe add some stolen bases, but also I think it's a way to have some safety around the bag, and I think that's really important that, it's dangerous playing middle infield with guys coming into you, and if the second base shortstop have a little bit more room to work, I think that's a great thing.
Also, the first base running lane. Can we fix that? Sorry, I know, but just like, let's go.
I don't get it.
What are we doing?
We'll put that in the suggestion box.
I know we'll get a suggestion box. Don't worry, everybody. How often do you speak to Tom Ricketts, and what are the conversations usually about when you're going over payroll, budget? Are we going to be near the tax, stuff like that?
We probably talk 3 or 4 times a week, depending on if he's in the office or not. I feel like I want to make sure our conversations are important. I don't want to just constantly be barraging him. But I find that we end up, what I think might be a 3-minute conversation, we end up talking for 20 minutes to half an hour, because he's really curious about a lot of aspects of the organization. He's always asking me different questions, and I think that's great. I think that I know Theo had a really good relationship with Tom, and I certainly have. And he's very involved. He knows everything that's going on. He wants to take trips to the minor leagues, and he's asking about the draft and international scouting and really the fine details. But he lets us do our job, which is wonderful. And I think that's what every person in my position and Carter's position want, is the ability to feel like you can make those decisions. But he really knows what's going on at every level.
For fans want to ask questions, please line up over here on the left side. We're going to get to questions in a moment. So start a queue, and we'll get to questions shortly as we continue here with Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins. As far as this offseason is concerned, when you look at what the Mets have done, what's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of what it's done with their team, and then also does it affect your job in terms of the amount of money they're spending?
I mean, obviously, that's unprecedented territory that they're in on, but you look at baseball, and obviously they've built a really good team, but they certainly haven't guaranteed a World Series. And we know that we can compete with those teams. I think we were 6-0 against the Phillies last year. They were in the World Series. It's baseball. On any given day, there's an opportunity for a team to come out and look like the 27 Yankees. So that's what we're excited about. We feel like we have the right players in place to be able to win some baseball games this year and in the future. And regardless of what someone does out of our control, what we're controlling, we feel like we're moving in the right direction.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, one of the things I learned with the Red Sox was we were up against the Yankees. At that point, the Yankees were sort of, a little bit what the Mets are now, where they could outspend us. They could always sign the biggest free agent. They could always do that. And we learned pretty early on that we have to run our race and do the things that we think make us great and make the right decisions for, back then, the Red Sox. And I think if you start paying attention to that and you start to try to chase that, you're going to make some really bad decisions. So, of course you pay attention to it. Of course it affects the market. But ultimately, we have to do the right things for the Cubs to make this a special team and a special place. And we can't constantly react and change our plan based on what other teams in the market are doing.
When you look at the state of the game and trends, I mean, just begin with Moneyball and the idea of on-base percentage and the next slugging correlate to run scoring, and on-base percentage is undervalued. Well, that's gone away. On-base percentage is highly valued now. The Rays do a thing with a defensive floor for players. How much harder is it to find a market inefficiency in today's game, the way all of the teams are being run, compared to, say, that team you won with in 2004?
It's unbelievably more difficult, but that actually makes the job more, in some ways more interesting. I mean, I look back now at, I always say that we had our 2003 offseason in Boston. We had a great offseason. We signed Ortiz, we signed Bill Miller, we signed Mike Timlin, we signed Kevin Millar. We had this great offseason by spending like $10 million. But what's amazing is that there was 7 or 8 other players that we could have brought in that would have been almost as good. Carlos Guillen or Travis Hafner. The player acquisition at that stage was just easier. If you were using certain metrics, you were one of 3 or 4 teams that were thinking that way. Now the world is incredibly flat. And I think that for me, what I think about is so much of it becomes about player development. How do we make the players we have better? How do we think outside the box on different transactions? Because you're right, almost every team is looking at very similar metrics, very similar things. And so with the world being flatter in that regard, you have to think a little bit different. And I think, player development and player optimization become that much more important in that world.
I think the thing I would add to that is, you think about the concept of speed versus velocity. So speed is how fast you're going. Velocity is how fast you're going in a particular direction. And a lot of the competitive advantage that teams can find is their ability to have great velocity. So there's so many great ideas out there. There's so many smart people. You can just go on the internet and Google smart baseball ideas, and you'll find some, I promise you. But if you chase all of those in different directions, if you don't get your people aligned in one direction, your philosophy looks like Stretch Armstrong, basically, right? You're not going anywhere because you're just getting pulled in all different directions. But if you can get an entire group moving in one direction, you can actually start making some gains. And I think that's where some of the advantage is. Hopefully, as you guys have heard some people, from the organization, talk over the course of the last couple of days, you can start to feel some of that direction, and we definitely feel like we're heading that way, and excited about it for sure.
If you want to line up, we can line up for questions over here on the right as well. But I'm going to start taking some fan questions. So if you want to queue up over on this side as well, you can do that. Okay, let's go to fan questions. First question, go ahead.
All right, my question, Carter and Jed. You have Suzuki anchored in right. You got Bellinger on a 1-year prove-it deal, and in left you have Ian Happ. You either are going to sign this Ian to an extension or he makes free agency. You also have PCA, you also have Brennan Davis, and you also have Alexander Canario. So you got to kind of come up with a plan pretty soon. Are you going to sign Ian to an extension? And if you do, how is that going to affect the other 3 minor league outfielders that are knocking at the door?
So it's a great question. We were glad last night we got the arbitration deal done with Ian. I've said publicly, we've met with his agents. We never talk about extensions, but we have met with his agents about that. So, we'd love to have Ian as a part of the Cubs for a long time. What you just described is such a great problem to have, honestly, that you want real depth. I think you want real depth in your organization because when you have injuries or poor performance, you have a really good player to call on. You also want depth because we may need another position and someone can be valuable in a trade. So the way you were describing that, it is a little bit of a difficult puzzle piece to figure out how to put together, but at the same time, I think that's the kind of problem I hope we have over and over and over, because if you have too many good players at one position, there's always a good solution that you can figure out to get out of that problem.
Yeah, so signing, if you were to sign Ian Happ to an extension and then, Brennan Davis continuing to grow and be a monster wherever he fits in, if he were to be blocked in a spot, you'll deal with that problem, right? Excess of talent isn't necessarily a problem.
Yeah, and I think that for all those prospects that we just talked about, they're all really exciting. They're all really good players, and there's all real development left. I think we saw it. The perils of that a little bit with obviously Alexander had a bad injury this winter. Brennan had the back problems last year. I mean, you never know when something like that's going to happen. So when you have real depth, it allows you to sort of mitigate that risk.
Next question. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Hoyer, I've been a Cub fan pretty much all my life since I was a toddler almost. I live in Indianapolis, and I drove up here to ask you about the new member of the St. Louis Cardinals, Wilson Contreras. I have watched him since the year that the Cubs won the World Championship, and he was, to my mind, instrumental in that. And I also believe that he has been the best offensive catcher in the National League since then. And I just don't understand, and I listen to the radio, that's really all I can do in Indianapolis, but there's certainly a perception that there wasn't a lot of interest in signing Wilson to a long-term deal here. And I'm also wondering if you knew that you could sign Wilson Contreras for what the Cardinals did, whether that should have been done. Thank you.
I appreciate the question, and I understand the question, and I would just say that, in these jobs, I feel like we are constantly thinking about how to, sort of build the next great Cubs team. Obviously, during the last 5 or 6 years, we were in constant, communication with Wilson and his agents, and, I very much appreciate, what he did for the organization, obviously with the World Series, how hard he plays on a daily basis. I actually grew to really like him as a person. We got along incredibly well. But I feel like, in these roles, I think sometimes we make hard decisions, and ultimately we never quite lined up on where the right place was on a long deal. And I'm excited about our team going forward. So I don't wish him luck because he's with the Cardinals, but I certainly wish him well as a person. And the Cubs are, we're going to move forward, and I'm excited about our team in 2023 and beyond.
Let's go this side over here. Go ahead.
So yeah, it's been difficult to see the 2016 Cubs leaving one after another, and while I understand most of the moves, the one that really stings, I think, is with Anthony Rizzo, because he was a guy that was there before everyone else, and he's a guy that could have been had pretty cheap. We had a hole at first base, and on behalf of my daughter, who's been heartbroken for a few years about this, she's like, when is Rizzo coming back? When are they bringing back Rizzo?
Well, I mean, I will say that all of the trades that we made that summer were obviously very difficult. I think the players, several of the players we traded away had been here for a long time, and they had come up through the system. And when they do, you get to know their families, you get to know them as people when you draft them at 18 or 21 years old. So I think from a personal standpoint, those are really hard. Obviously, I think from a personal standpoint for me, the Rizzo decision was that much harder just because I had been with him in 3 organizations and traded for him twice. And, listen, my son feels the same way. He's got, Rizzo posters on his wall. But, in this job, I feel like my job is to make the right decision for the future of the organization. We had extensive long-term contract discussions about keeping him here. Ultimately, we weren't able to get to the right place there. And, given where we were at that moment in 2021 and where we were for our future, I made the really hard decision to make a lot of those trades. So it wasn't easy. I think that all those players did wonderful things here. But when I look at where we are as an organization now and where we're going, ultimately, like, I feel strongly it was the right thing to do. And I think that is the job, is ultimately I'm here to make the best decisions for the Cubs and the future, and that's what I did.
You weren't here when that run took place. So, Carter, what was your view on it from the outside as it went along? A team that was really good in 15, amazing in 16, and won it all, and then the progression from there. What was your take?
So I think Jed's hit on, look, we have some of the best jobs in America, so this is not a complaint by any means, but just some of the challenge of, the roles that we're in, where we're wearing a lot of different hats. We're wearing the, hey, how can we make you better hat? Then we take that off and wear the, let's negotiate a contract with you hat. Then we take it off and we wear the, well, we're bringing another player in that might move you off of another position hat. The hat we wear the most is friend, and the hat we wear the most is person that cares about the person and wants to make that person better. And I think you can hear it in Jed's voice, just how much he cared about all of those players from that 2016 core. I had the ability to come in from the outside, right, and look at things objectively. And when I hear Jed talk about those trades, like, those are really difficult trades. He understands at a deep level how difficult those were, but he had to put on the what's best for the future of the Cubs hat. And he had to put that on and make a really hard decision, knowing that it was going to be the unpopular decision. And from the objective coming in from the Cleveland hat, it was able to say, hey, look, like, I do think that's the best way to get back to the Cubs teams that we want to be here as soon as possible, which is really, really hard. But I can tell you, in the back rooms, in the offices, when there's no one around, like, yeah, it's hard. It's so hard, because those guys had just such an impact on the city. I see it every day I walk into the office, all the pictures everywhere, and it just breaks my heart because I was on the Cleveland team in 2016 and I have to watch it. So trust me, there's nothing I want more than another World Series ring so that I don't have to watch people walking around wearing those big old things every single day. So we're doing that every second of every day to get there as soon as possible. That means sometimes we have to win wars and not win battles. But certainly it is our goal, just like everyone in this room, and we're going to bring it here as soon as we possibly can.
Can I just follow up real quick? I'm interested in how you experience it. I guess I'm kind of putting you on the couch here, so $225 an hour, something like that. Here's what I want to know. So you have the hat where you have to make the Cubs better. Do you allow yourself, though, to sit and connect on, again, I wasn't here, but nationally I covered that team a ton, so I was around you guys, around those players. Do you sit at all with the idea that they just want the band to come back? They don't just want the Cubs to win again. They want them to win again with Bryant, Baez, and Rizzo, because it felt so good when those guys won. So, like, do you allow yourself to sit with that idea and feel it and do what's necessary, or do you try to just push it aside? Sorry.
It wouldn't be natural just to put it aside. I think you have to sit with that feeling, because just like everyone in this room, I mean, I have some of my greatest experiences, in baseball and life with that group. I mean, candidly, there's not many things I'm more proud of than coming in here in 2011 and building up that group. That's exactly what we told everyone that we were going to do. We're going to build a young core, and we're going to win a World Series with it, and we did. And that was this great group that came together. And so, of course, you have to sit with that. But I also, in my mind, it's like, okay, we were at this crossroads as an organization, and the right thing to do was to figure out how to build it again. And so that was ultimately my decision, was that we were not in a position to be the organization or the team that we wanted to be. We're not in a position to build something great if we did that. And so that was a hard decision. But of course, you sit with the emotion. But I feel like we're on the front edge of something really special again, and we're going to get there. And yes, it will not be with the exact same players, but it's going to feel really, really good to get back, fill up Wrigley every year with a young, exciting team. And that's the goal. I look at other teams that have had to evolve, I guess I would say, in some ways, right? And those Red Sox teams that won, they won 4 World Series. Those teams look completely different. And I think that's part of our job, is to be willing to make those changes, because ultimately what these fans deserve is great baseball year in, year out. October baseball year in, year out, and that's ultimately what we're trying to provide as an organization.
All right, is your phone on silent? Just check it. See if anybody's come through. Go ahead.
All right, so Jed, obviously you worked with Theo for a very long time. And how did it feel for you when he left and you took his spot? And then how have you worked with Carter? How have you enjoyed that? And then lastly, do you have a Twitter imposter?
Can
you take the last question first, please?
Well, they're linked, obviously. They're linked. So Theo and I had this, it was just kind of a remarkable relationship in the sense that, we were 28 years old with the Red Sox. Obviously, he had been in baseball for a lot longer than me, but, we had all of these life experiences in some ways together in building up those Red Sox teams. And then I left for San Diego, and then we came back together here. And so, we had a wonderful relationship, and I learned so much from him, and I watched him evolve as a leader, as an executive, and that was a lot of fun. And we still talk all the time. He's still a great friend of mine. That was one of the things I talked to Carter about, and we had a lot of discussions about, when I was hiring him, is that I know that relationship, and I know how great it was, how much we trusted each other, and how often we disagreed, but would always come to the right place and always do the right thing for the organization we were working for. But that was almost a 20-year relationship that happened. Carter and I are not going to have that relationship immediately because that was so organic for so long. But the seeds of that are so important, and I think already in our relationship, we're really honest with each other. We disagree with each other all the time. I probably talk to him 15 to 20 times a day, which our wives are not thrilled about, but we're in constant communication. One of the things that I think was really cool is that Theo and I had the ability to design our offices in Arizona and design the offices here. And we built them with walls that moved so that effectively we were sharing one big office, because that's how often we would talk back and forth, just kind of yell to each other from the desk. And so I think that's really helped our relationship, is that we basically share an office and we're talking to each other all day. And I've learned so much from Carter, just being able to talk to him about what they did in Cleveland and how his brain works. And I like to think I've done the same thing for him. So obviously that relationship I had with him was built over so long. But I feel wonderful about our relationship, the trust we have. And of course, it's a different relationship, but it's been a great one so far.
Are you Sneak Attack on Twitter?
Is he on Twitter? I don't believe he is. I think we both got off. We said we're good.
All right. Over here, go ahead.
This may not be the right forum for it or not, but I wanted to ask, since I have Marquee here and Cubs MLB, can you explain to me the blackout rules, and does the MLB have any plans to change it? I'm here from Nashville, Tennessee, and we get blacked out games, and we pay for MLB TV. So I'd like to know if there's anything that anybody anywhere can do so that when the Cubs play Atlanta or Cleveland or Cincinnati, I can still watch my games.
Ultimately, it's not their department, nor is it mine, but it is something, again, that it's the league office. I think the point is fair. I think they understand that the point is fair, that there are plenty of people. The blackout rule is problematic. They know it. It needs to be fixed. There's no question about it. So hopefully it's something, you want as many people to be able to take in your product as possible, and obviously it makes it difficult. So I hear you, unfortunately. The one other thing I'll say is, I know sometimes we're not on Marquee, but if we're on Apple or we're on Peacock, that's not the Cubs' decision. That's not Marquee's decision. Those are national deals that Major League Baseball makes, and the league is able to take those. So when we disappear, it's not our fault.
On that note, real quick, any plans for Marquee to expand?
I'm trying to decrease personally. So that's where I've been. All right, let's go over here. Question.
I'm really curious. I think often as a fan and in people thinking about baseball, we can forget that players are humans that have like real emotional, familial, and like personal needs. And the image of Chris Bryant crying in the dugout and the image of Ian Happ hugging Wilson Contreras when they thought they were going to get traded is going to stay in my brain forever. And I'm curious how you as a business person make decisions holding the fact that the people you're making business decisions on behalf of are real human beings.
I think I picked up on all of that, but basically the question is, and just not if I'm right, just like how are we factoring in the emotional aspect of things, how much of an impact the decisions we have on, people, not only from a baseball perspective, but just from a life perspective?
And like holding the ways in which like money and business decisions shape people's lives and how their lives can shape the decisions that you make.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets back to that wearing different hats question, and it's a great one, right? Where, we have that teammate hat. Like, we spend so much time with all of these people, with all the guys on our team, the coaches, the players, like that becomes, our family. And it's really difficult to take the family hat off for a second and take the business person hat and put it on and try to make a best decision to try to win as many games as possible. But at the end of the day, Jed and I talk about what's our first principle? What's our foundational assumption that stands alone? And it's win Major League Baseball games and do it in the right way. And so we make all of our decisions under that framework, which unfortunately has some collateral damage of things that stink like that. It stinks. But we're trying to win baseball games, do it the right way, and we'll do everything we can to give you as many happy images as we can moving forward.
On the human stuff, I mean, you come from a front office way back that was one of the first analytically minded front offices. You have that same perspective. It would seem to me, and I haven't discussed this with you guys at all, it would seem to me that along with putting together team and players that have tremendous upside, there's some leadership components that have been added here with a guy like Swanson, who clearly wants to be here, wants to be the face of this franchise, is a guy who's big in the room. Hosmer, I mean, I've been around him during his postseason runs, is a major presence. You go back to those teams, the guy who's managing your team was a big-time leader in that clubhouse, and you had a good manager. So for both of you, each, how much is leadership factored in? Was it factored in with some of these signings? And then, I guess more than anything, how do you discern what leadership is?
It's a great question, and really, really difficult question to answer. I could probably talk about this for hours. Very much so, it was factored in this offseason. I think we already have some guys on the team that have real leadership qualities. I mean, I'll use Nico and Ian as an example, that both those guys have a real desire to lead. But it takes time, I've been around a lot of young players that come up that have leadership qualities and they want to do it. But no young player can lead without having some success in the big leagues, doing it for a while. His voice, he has to kind of find his voice in the room. And so I think that part's really difficult. I think, candidly, I've only been around a handful of players that could lead while they struggle. I think that most players, ultimately, it's a game where your individual actions are really important. You're hitting by yourself. You're in the field by yourself sometimes. And so when a guy is struggling, a lot of times they kind of retrench and focus on what they're doing. They're working on their swing, and they're not thinking as much about the group. And so it's really hard to find someone that can struggle and still lead at the same time. And using our manager, I think with Rossi, one of the things that was unique about him, in my experience in baseball, was that he knew that a big percentage of his salary that we were paying him was for leadership. He got that idea that, yes, he was catching John Lester every fifth day, but we weren't paying him only for that. We were paying him to lead the room, and he took that really seriously. So leadership in a major league team is really complicated. What I've found is that there are some real leaders in the game, but what I've found is when you bring a group of players together, it's a really good group that everyone's about winning, and I think that you look at the guys we brought in this year, they're about winning. I think that snowball can really get going down the hill when you have a great vibe in the room, everyone's showing up every day to get better, everyone's showing up every day to beat that opponent. I think when you have a group that's showing up every day thinking about arbitration or showing up every day thinking about free agency, that can be really difficult. But when you have a group of guys that really care about winning and care about each other, it really gets that snowball going downhill. Because this is an everyday thing, and I think that feeling in the room and that feeling of preparation and winning really matters. And I think that can really happen. And I love that aspect of this team that we put together.
I had someone once, when I asked what leadership is specific to a player, and the guy said he's someone that cares as much, probably more about others than he does himself, and people respond to that. So I think it's probably a good place. Go ahead.
Joe Madden had a book come out recently about his departure with the Angels and how the management was telling him what to do. Why do you think Joe Madden isn't managing anywhere? And do you guys still ever reach out and get any ideas from him?
So Joe is wonderful. I still talk to him, every month or two. We had a great relationship. I do think it's challenging. I think there's as a manager evolves, I think that, when he was with Tampa, clearly there was a lot of front office influence in what he was doing. Obviously, he came here, and we tried to do both, right? We tried to sort of give him all the information. And one of Joe's best skills is he wants all the information. Clearly, and I wasn't there, obviously, but clearly something with the Angels happened where he felt like they were overstepping that. Because I felt like we had a pretty good balance of, like, we're providing you all the information. And he would be calling our research and development guys all the time and asking for ideas or asking for a clarification on stuff. So he really did embrace that here, but obviously he sort of felt like, given his track record experience, he must have felt like that was like an overstepping. Joe created an incredible vibe. That was a gift he had, and I think, when I look back on those 15, 16, 17 teams, I really do feel like he was the perfect guy at the perfect time with those young players. He provided them, real cover to be themselves and allowed them to flourish, and for that, I'm forever grateful.
I want to thank all you guys for your questions. Appreciate it. I want to thank both of you guys. We've been spending a lot of time together. What are we doing this week? You guys want to hang out? What's going on? Monday, Tuesday?
Can't wait.
Thank you so much. Seriously, you guys. Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, thank you.
Boog. Thanks, you guys, everyone, so much.
Cole Wright, let's send it over to you.
Thank you very much.